At first glance, the idea of a kamikaze-style mission immediately conjures images of unflinching fanaticism, a soldier blindly following orders into certain death. But the reality was often far more complex, far more human. In the case of this German pilot, the story begins not with heroics or ideology, but with fear. Real, palpable fear that gripped him as he prepared for a mission where the chances of survival were almost non-existent. For many, it's difficult to imagine the internal struggle of a man trained to fight, to endure, yet suddenly confronted with a task that feels less like combat and more like a sentence. This pilot, like so many others during the closing years of the war, had been trained rigorously, drilled in procedure and precision, taught that duty came before self. But duty is an abstract thing. And when the cockpit door closed behind him, the theory met the unforgiving reality of human instinct. He was not a machine. And the reality of being sent on a mission with near zero odds of returning shook him to his core. He experienced the universal fear of dying, amplified by the knowledge that this was a mission not simply dangerous, but essentially designed to end his life. The preparation alone was a crucible. Sitting in the aircraft, checking instruments, listening to the hum of engines and the faint sounds of mechanics in the hangar below, he felt the weight of every decision he had ever made in training. His hands, trained to operate levers and controls without thought, betrayed him slightly, trembling despite his best efforts. His mind raced with questions that no pilot wanted to ask. Will I make it? Can I even survive this? For the first time, the abstract commands of officers, the duty, the honor, the cause, clashed with the most basic human instinct, the desire to live. It was in this moment that the tears came. Not out of shame, not out of weakness, but out of the sheer, overwhelming humanity of facing certain death while still being asked to perform, to function, to be a soldier. Crying did not make him less courageous. It made him painfully real. It revealed the chasm between what soldiers are asked to do and what they feel as human beings. Here was a man caught between obedience and instinct, a struggle invisible to most historical accounts, yet profoundly important to understanding what it meant to live and fight during World War II. His tears were not public, not a spectacle for his comrades. They were private, a release of the tension building inside him for hours, perhaps days. They spoke to fear. Yes. But also to the incredible psychological pressure placed on soldiers sent into the most extreme circumstances. For those of us watching history unfold in stories or documentaries, it's easy to forget that war is fought not just with bombs and bullets, but with the hearts and minds of the people carrying them. Every mission, every attack, every strategy involves humans who think, feel, and fear in ways that cannot be fully captured by statistics or reports. Understanding this moment changes how we see the pilot, the mission, and the war itself. It reminds us that bravery is not the absence of fear. It is often the act of continuing despite it. In crying, he acknowledged the terrifying reality of what he faced. But he also accepted that he would go forward. That he would do what was expected, even as his mind screamed for self-preservation. It's a quiet, intimate kind of courage, one that rarely makes headlines but defines the lived experience of war. By focusing on the human side of this desperate mission, we gain perspective on the true cost of obedience in war, the emotional labor behind acts of heroism, and the private battles that accompany public ones. It reminds us that behind every cockpit, every uniform, and every mission, there is a human being grappling with fear, duty, and survival. And in that grappling, we see a story that is both heartbreaking and profoundly human. One that lingers far longer than the mission itself. As the pilot sat in the cockpit, staring at the endless expanse of sky and the instruments before him, the full weight of the mission began to settle in. This was no ordinary sortie. Unlike typical combat missions, where survival, even under heavy fire, remained a possibility, this task carried an almost certain promise of death. Every training exercise, every drill, and every familiar motion now collided with the stark reality. He was being asked to confront the impossible. The human mind struggles to process such a scenario, to reconcile the instinct for survival with the concept of duty so absolute that it demanded self-destruction. For him, that reconciliation was a battle in itself, one that began before the engines even roared to life. The cockpit, normally a place of control and focus, became a confining theater of dread. He checked instruments with practiced hands, but the motions felt heavier, almost mechanical, as though his body was moving through the motions while his mind struggled to catch up. The instruments, the levers, the gauges. All were familiar. But they now represented more than just tools of flight. They were reminders of mortality, of the razor-thin lines separating him from death. Every glance at the altimeter, every flick of a switch, was accompanied by a private, nagging question. How will this end? As he taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky, the fear didn't dissipate. It intensified. The higher he climbed, the more surreal the world became. The air grew thin, the sunlight more piercing, and the ground below receded, turning cities and fields into abstract shapes. At altitude, the horizon curved slightly, giving the impression of a fragile bubble of existence suspended over a vast, uncaring world. With every passing moment, he felt both removed from the world he knew and trapped within a mission that demanded he ignore the most basic human instinct, the desire to survive. The psychological strain was relentless. Unlike conventional combat, there was no immediate engagement to distract the mind from the threat. He had no dogfights, no nearby enemy to focus on, only the growing awareness of what lay ahead. The mission itself became a looming presence, like a shadow stretching across every thought. Fear, doubt, and anticipation mingled together until he felt exposed. Not just in the cockpit but in the very essence of being human. The reality of impending death was inescapable. And it pressed down like a weight on his chest, testing his ability to function under extreme stress. When the moment to act finally arrived, it was almost anticlimactic in its inevitability. The act of following orders required both suppression of terror and complete concentration. Every motion had to be executed flawlessly, because any hesitation could result in failure, either to the mission or to his own survival, however slim the possibility. And yet, despite the fear, there was also an undeniable clarity. In that space between life and death, his mind focused with an intensity that could only come from knowing that there was no margin for error. Every decision, every movement became both urgent and precise. Even as he executed the mission, his thoughts could not escape the paradox of courage and fear intertwined. Crying beforehand had not been a sign of weakness. It had been a release, a recognition of the impossible reality he faced. Now, in the cockpit, he carried that emotional honesty forward into action, channeling the fear into focus. There was no room for self-pity, no time to debate morality. The mission demanded total commitment. And yet, behind the mask and uniform, he remained a man confronting the impossible. This encounter with the inevitable revealed a side of war that often goes unnoticed. The profound psychological weight that soldiers carry when tasked with actions that defy instinct. It was a reminder that bravery is not the absence of fear but the act of facing it, of moving forward when every fiber of your being screams to retreat. The pilot's tears, the anxiety, the struggle to reconcile duty with survival, all underscored a fundamental truth. War is fought not only in skies and battlefields but also within the hearts and minds of those who serve. In witnessing his story, we see the human cost of obedience, the fragility of life under extreme pressure, and the quiet, personal courage that history rarely records. What makes this story so compelling isn't just the pilot's fear or the impossible nature of the mission. It's what it teaches us about the human experience in war. While battles are often measured in victories, losses, and strategic outcomes, the internal struggles of those carrying out the orders are rarely examined. This German pilot's emotional moment, his tears before a near-suicidal sortie, offers a rare window into the personal cost of obedience and the invisible battles fought within soldiers' minds. It's a reminder that war is not only a clash of machines and armies, but a theater of human endurance, morality, and emotion. Looking at this pilot's experience, we see how ideology and duty can clash with instinct. Soldiers are trained to follow orders, to act without hesitation, and to put mission above self. But when a mission is designed to end in death, that obedience becomes a complex psychological burden. His tears were not a sign of weakness. They were a manifestation of humanity asserting itself in the face of mechanical demands. They showed that even in highly disciplined militaries, even within ideologies built on strict obedience, human emotion cannot be fully suppressed. It's a nuance often missing from historical accounts, which focus on statistics, victories, or propaganda. Yet it is in these moments that we truly understand what war asks of individuals. The lessons extend beyond a single pilot or mission. By examining this overlooked perspective, we gain insight into the broader reality of total war. Every soldier, whether kamikaze style in Germany, Japan, or elsewhere, faced moments where personal survival collided with duty. These moments were fraught with moral and psychological complexity. The pilot's emotional reaction illustrates how war forces ordinary people into extraordinary circumstances, requiring choices that challenge the very nature of courage, ethics, and self-preservation. Observing his internal struggle allows us to appreciate the depth of human resilience and the quiet heroism that is measured not by destruction inflicted, but by the ability to act despite fear. Moreover, this story sheds light on the moral ambiguity present in extreme wartime decisions. Modern audiences may instinctively judge the mission as fanatical or senseless, but understanding the pilot's emotional state provides context. It wasn't zealotry alone that compelled him to fly. It was a combination of duty, training, fear, and the social and military pressures surrounding him. This nuance humanizes historical figures often reduced to symbols or stereotypes, reminding us that individuals in war are far more complicated than their roles on paper. They are people grappling with impossible choices, confronting mortality and negotiating between obedience and conscience. The significance of this perspective is lasting. It reminds historians, storytellers, and viewers alike that the personal stories behind military actions are as important as the strategic outcomes. By focusing on the pilot's emotional struggle, we are offered a lens into the psychological and moral dimensions of warfare, dimensions that conventional accounts often overlook. His experience encourages empathy, not sympathy, an understanding that war is not just a game of tactics, but a crucible of human emotion, courage, and doubt. Finally, the story demonstrates that even small, private moments can resonate through history. A single pilot's tear before a dangerous mission may not have changed the outcome of the war, but it changes how we perceive the people behind the conflict. It teaches that heroism can take many forms, not only in spectacular acts of combat, but also in enduring fear, facing the impossible, and proceeding despite the mind and body screaming to stop. These human experiences, quiet and often unseen, are the threads that weave together the larger tapestry of history. In understanding them, we gain a deeper, more compassionate view of war and the people caught in its relentless grip.